So let's start. Good morning. I hope you're doing well so far. My name is Louis Latour. I'm a software developer at FHIR, and it's my pleasure now to introduce Rutt. She will talk about the implementation of a national data viewer using FHIR. So Rutt, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Welcome, everyone. I am Rutt. I'm from TEHIK, which is the e-health agency in Estonia. And I'm going to tell you about the clinical data viewer that has been built on top of our national EHR. Just to know what the context of the Estonian EHR is, we've had the Central Estonian Health Information System since 2008, which is quite a long time for a central repository, I would say. It has been built on HL7 CDA. And luckily for us, this is mandatory to use for all the healthcare practitioner systems. So every doctor in Estonia has to be able to retrieve data from that central repository and also send data back to the repository. And for that, we have created central specifications and also central terminology for that data exchange. Right now, like many other countries, we have the strategic plan to move gradually to FHIR. Gradually, because our whole healthcare system is entirely dependent on that central repository, we cannot do a quick change. We cannot leave anyone behind. Like everyone has to come together in their own pace. So we've been trying to find ways how to make that transition a little bit softer and flexible so that it could happen over a long time and keep CDA and FHIR in action in parallel. So we started building a clinical data viewer. A clinical data viewer, our requirement was that it has to be built on FHIR and it has to use the CDA data so that we could, among other things, we could create the system and the proof of concept that we can use CDA and FHIR in parallel. These two are not ruling each other out. So it had to handle different versions of CDA templates because, like I said, it had been already in place since 2008. So there had been many changes in the terminology, but also CDA templates. But you still have to use the old data. It also had to remove duplicates and handle simple errors in data so that your data viewer doesn't crash on something unexpected. And also the CDA to FHIR conversion had to happen on the fly. It's not like we're going to create another repository next to it. We have CDA documents here, and then we create FHIR documents, but this conversion had to happen on the fly. And then on the design side, we had a very strong will to actually make doctors use this new data viewer. So what we did, we really had a group of healthcare professionals who were giving advice every single moment. And I think not all the design elements that they chose would have been the same, they would not been the same decisions if it had been done by us. I will show you later, but this is what they need. So who are we to say no, you don't want it that way, let us do something else. So it had to be easy to use and implement and a single sign-on because it's a separate web application, but the doctor doesn't want to sign into different places. So we had to be usable from their own desktop application or their own interface. And also there are data combined from different sources, not just the central repository, but also e-prescription center, for example, is separately and some other things. So basically, we take the CDA, we break it into pieces using FHIR resources, and then we use it like a Lego to create different views. I think most of you are familiar with the classical CDA views where you have a list of documents and then you open a document and you have a CDA document. So this is the thing that we wanted to avoid for the future solution. So data viewer, and this is just like a teaser slide. I will show you these views later. Had to be able to take that data and aggregate it into different views and use the filters so you can actually get interactive views of everything. So this is the starting picture. And because I assumed that not many people in the audience would speak Estonian, I see one, but not many other. So I contaminated the picture a little bit with English translations so that maybe it's easier to follow this way. So the first page, like when the doctor logs in, the first thing they see is this quite like the recent entries or like the recent results from the lab or pathology or imaging or surgical procedures. And you still have this document history view here, which is basically like the CDA view, like they can still access the original CDA document. So if they're interested in that document that they maybe created yesterday or a week ago, it's still accessible here. Like they don't have to then find the bits that they actually entered. And I think it's sort of we've been asked many times, like we do a European cross-border patient summary, but we don't use patient summary on a national level, and we don't have any plans for that, because basically this is what replaces it for us. And just like bit by bit, like we go like that upper section there are almost no words you can see, but there's a lot of information behind it. So one view, like one of the controversial views, but that I would have never chosen, is the diagnosis as just codes. And this is like a very quick visual overview. Like if the diagnosis is written in bigger form, it means it's a recurrent diagnosis. Maybe it's not, maybe it hasn't been there in past 6 months, but it has been like something repeated in the patient history. And the critical diagnoses that are defined by a value set go red. Like maybe it hasn't happened many times, but it's a critical thing, and maybe it's like a continuous problem for that patient. But also, like if you are like me or other people who want to build user interfaces and you actually want a list of diagnoses, or you want it sorted in another way, so you're not comfortable with that code view, you do have settings here, so you can actually create your own view out of that. So you're not stuck with this decision. And then like that even smaller thing up there, that contains a lot of information. So just by these icons and colors, you can see like if it's green, the first one, it means the person has a valid health insurance. Again, the doctor isn't that interested in the, like, at least in Estonia, they're not very interested in the details of that health insurance. It's national health insurance. It's pretty much the same for everyone, but it's important to know if it's there or it's not. The patient is not on sick leave. Then the third one is medical devices. Again, this is also in patient summary. It's very important information when it's there, but it's empty. Like you don't want to actually waste space on the user interface to have like an empty box and say like we had no information, but it's a very quick view to see like there's something there. And actually, if you hover it, you already see a list, but you can also like click it and go in a different view. The patient has no disability. There's some COVID information. There are no scheduled appointments in the future, and the patient has risk factors. That's another thing that is really important if it's there. It has to be read. It has to be somewhere like in the very front page, but usually it's empty. So you don't want to like just have it there if you don't have it. And also we know that the patient is hiding something. Like there's disclosed data. There's no way just like what data that is, but it's just a informative thing to the doctor. Like not everything might be here available. Chronology of records. This is a timeline where you see I should use the mouse maybe. I don't know if it's, no, the mouse doesn't work. So by these data entries, you have documents, diagnosis, lab results, imaging, and you can see like in the timeline, like something has happened to the patient, and sometimes it can be a good indicator. Like there's not much information there, but for example, for this patient, we see that every spring something is happening to him, like prescription wise. And that is because this is our patient summary test patient, and we have testing periods in spring. That's why that patient seems to have a lot of prescription in spring. But for some other patient, it can indicate like there is something periodic happening. And you can zoom into the timeline. You can have a week view or a month view as you need. So lab results is one of the fanciest views that we have. Of course, you can filter everything on the right side. I don't know, that's left or right. I don't know how it's for anyone who sees it, but on one side there are like filters. And then again, there's a timeline. You can see different measurements of the same thing over the time, like how it has changed. If you click on the rows, you can actually create a chart that you see on the corner there, right or left, whatever that is. And again, like when you click one measurement, you can actually see like the summary view, and from every single spot that you see on the screen, you can always go to the original CDA document. Like if you really want to see the whole context, you can always go there. So this is the list of other views that I'm not gonna show you, but if you're interested, then I do have a demo option in my computer, so you can just walk up to me and ask. So part 2, like how do we get this data from CDA to FHIR? First of all, our CDA documents are not in, I think many countries it's in IHE XDS repository. Our CDAs are in a database. We have done this XQuery querying before for example, the international patient summary that we use. We also do it on the fly. We do the queries across the patient history and assemble it on the fly. So we knew that we can do that on the fly. That had been already tested. The challenges were, of course, the terminology changes over the time. For example, in the lab, not only like the value sets versions were changed, but also like the whole code systems had changed. But when we saw, the filtering here, if you filter something and you want the data over time, you have to be able to go back in your value sets and understand like this data here, it's another code system, it's another whatever, maybe like the granularity can be different, but you have to be able to sort of get those ends together in order to make the filtering work. So it was a lot of work with the terminology, and we also understood like we have to handle our terminology much better in the future to make sure that we do have the consistent stream of terminology. And also like duplicates. I'll tell you more about this process on this picture, where on one side we have CDA documents, and then inside CDA documents, we basically have sections or entries with all sorts of different data. And what you have in CDA is that, for example, a lab result, you can have it as a lab result, but you can also have it in a hospital discharge and probably some other places. So when you do a query across everything, this is the first step. You get the XQuery, you get all the lab results from all the documents where it can be. Then we map it to FHIR, and then comes the very complicated process of removing duplicates, because the same data can be in different documents. But it's not always so easy to determine if it's a duplicate or is it not. Like for lab results, it's relatively easy. For other cases, sometimes it's not. Then we create the FHIR bundle. Again, we don't create FHIR documents. We get, basically it's a search bundle. You get like a big bundle of the same kind of resources. And then as a final step, we actually convert it for presentation, which sort of minimizes the FHIR part in the middle here right now. But the FHIR part is there for the future, because we want to go forward with the data viewer so that it wouldn't just be a viewer, but it would actually be an interactive user interface. And then the FHIR part is more reasonable. Right now, we make it into FHIR, and then we make it into something else. And maybe it's not like the best architecture if you just look at this picture, not into the future. But of course, it allowed us to create the whole system and the proof of concepts and everything. Like we do have a very good proof that what we're doing is good, it's working, it's scalable. So our conclusion is like, we had very positive feedback from users, our healthcare professionals, which is quite rare, I think, in healthcare actually, because usually when you change something in the interface, like even if it's objectively better, usually the first feedback is not very positive. People don't like changes in the user interfaces. But that was actually very, very, very good feedback. We also proved that CDA and FHIR at the same time are perfectly possible. We can move from one to another if we need to. The mappings that we used, I would say they were rather implementation specific. There is a big dream that because everyone uses CDA and then everyone uses FHIR, you can get some generic mappings and it will solve all your problems. It's not likely to happen because most of the time you're doing mappings, you are just trying to handle all the things that are different for you. Like you're not gonna get a lot out of someone else's mappings. The basic part, yes, but still there's a lot of work. And of course, the data quality is what determines the result. And we can say that actually the data quality is going up also because of that clinical data viewer, because it gives the doctors an instant feedback why structured data is important. Like they see like something is not coming up in these nice pictures, and they know it's because they put it in the text. Like they didn't use the right places where to store the data, and they lost something, and they get instant feedback. Like if I had done it differently, then the result would have been better for me and for everyone else, and also for the secondary use of data somewhere down the line. So I'm here. You can contact me usually, I think, on Zulip chat. If you're more comfortable talking to a developer, you can actually contact Igor Bosenko. He's behind the actual, like his company is behind the thing. And you can ask me for a demo. It is available in my computer. I can show you what the data viewer is, and you can see also the other views. So thank you. If you have questions.
So thank you, Rutt, for this user-first UI, which is good. So indeed, is there any question in the audience? Yes.
So one question on what you talked about at the end, the unstructured data or the text. How have you approached that for bringing it to FHIR or to exposing it in the viewer, or is it just not there at all in the viewer today? So something that was textual but not structured.
It is in the viewer, but I think it's mostly available in these original documents.
Okay, so you bring up the original document.
But also like lab results, if you go to a single lab results, I didn't really show you much of that. Like if you have those nice views, like every dot in the timeline view, for example, like if you hover it or you click it, you actually see the text as well. If it's connected to the lab results, you get the text. It's not that it's missing, but for example, on a chart, if you put the blood pressure measurement in text, then it won't be in the chart probably. So we cannot compare these things.
Okay.
Yes.
I think you mentioned it, I probably missed it, but you're now putting this FHIR viewer on top of what's basically a facade. Are there also other use cases for it right now? Because you have this facade, this API, are there other systems who are querying it to get the same information? And for what purpose are they using that information?
Do you mean the FHIR resources as such? Like, is anyone using like it as a query?
Yeah,
or...
so we had that flow diagram, and the last step was the FHIR viewer. So that's showing the FHIR data, but the step before that is the FHIR.
Right now, this is the only user, but it is something again for the future probably, because we should allow people to create their own viewers, for example. So we don't rule that out, but right now, yeah, this application is the only user.
Okay, thank you.
You mentioned some struggles with terminology, which I think we've all faced, and I was just wondering if you could talk on that more and some of the solutions you guys came up with.
Yeah. Terminology-wise, one of the problems was the inconsistency between value set versions, or like value sets sort of ended without conclusion, without the information, like the concept in the value set. You don't have information like what is it mapped to now, or how it relates to the next thing. Also, like one of the problems that we faced is, for example, these filters and things like in UI. You also need the same value set, but not as the same long list. So you actually have different needs for the value set for the UI and for queries. So I think of solution that we did. I think we did some concept maps, for example, between like when we switched from local code system, like, you know, like 001, 002, you've seen them probably, to a SNOMED, then we needed concept map between the two.
Yes, getting it.
Yeah.
Great, thanks.
So I think now with no question, I think we are running out. So thank you again, Rutt. So don't forget to fill out the feedback if you can. It's always helpful. And then I don't know if you stay or I don't know what's the plan, but thank you for being here.